Hi, welcome to our next episode here. I'm sitting with Sam McCrary, one of my dear friends and a local innovator here that I've gotten to know over the last several years. And Sam, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
We wanted to talk a little bit about, we've had venture capitalists here, angel investors, we've had entrepreneurs, and a lot of it's in the tech space. But as you and I have gotten to talk over the last several months, and we talk about a bunch of just innovative things that's out there, sometimes we forget that what was old can actually be innovative into something new. And you come from a lot of a rich history, farming, athletic training, all that sort of stuff. But I'm so glad that we get to talk about what I'm going to call FarmTech, just to make it a buzzword there. But what you're doing on the regenerative land. Why don't you start off by talking about what's the problem out there with farming that you see that's out there that you guys are trying to address?
Absolutely. So one of the I think the biggest issues that we're having, as a society, is we're looking at, what are the multiple causes of carbon emissions, and so a lot of that stuff gets the bad rap on people like cows. Cows and farming is the worst thing in the world. We got to stop doing it. Well, I don't know about you, but I like to eat, and
I love to eat,
and I definitely like my food, and so. I farm. We have a 320-acre farm that was established in the 50s up in Santa Ana, little town up in central Texas. And my grandfather put it together. My dad farmed it up until he died. And then when he died, I took it over with my brother. And, it's interesting when I'm out there doing what we always do, which is turn the dirt, plow the field. And you plow the field and you plant the next crop. And then you plow the field. We plow the field to get rid of the weeds, we say. And every time I turn that dirt, you just look at it, all this fungal and bacteria and just all this moisture that just dries up, and then the dust blows and it all blows away. And so really, you start realizing that one of the biggest issues we're having as farmers is we're losing all the topsoil, all the nutrient-rich soil that we need to grow healthy crops. And we're slowly watching all this land wash away. And then the other thing is urban growth. We're slowly, look at San Antonio towards Castroville. Land is being taken away by subdivisions. And so what's going to happen long term if we keep doing everything the way that we are? And so kind of what people have started to addressing, more than 20 years ago is what's been kind of coined in the last few years as regenerative agriculture. It's what can we do to produce a healthier product for people to eat so we have a healthier society. What can we do to help reduce carbon emissions? What can we do to help make the world a better place than to keep doing it the way in which we've been doing it? And I won't say forever, the way in which we've been doing it since the 40s, the 30s, the 50s, when really we started doing tractors and large-scale conventional farming.
But we've been farming for hundreds and thousands of years,
yes,
right? And the evolution of farming, was primitive.
Yep.
And then along with the industrialization of the world came industrialized, commercialized farming. You talked about the tractors. But then we talk about the innovation really since we've done the industrialization of farming. A lot of it seems to be more pesticide-based, chemical-based, than it is any sort of techniques or process issues with the farming. Our solution has always been a better seed, chemical, or a better chemical to apply on the top of that farm. Not really much on the process of farming. Is that right?
Correct. And so just take corn growers. Corn is one of our largest commodities, and I'm not my commodity that we farm is we plant grain to feed cows. And we're trying to diversify that to add pigs and sheep and everything else. But commodity farmers, what do we use corn for? We use corn for fuel. We use corn for alcohol. We use corn for everything, right? So corn is a huge one. Well, the seed that we've developed is exactly what you said. It's Roundup ready seed. So what do we know about Roundup? Well, Roundup we know causes some cancer. That's been proven. Well, so we have a seed of corn that we can plant and then pour Roundup over it to make sure that we don't get any other weeds in the field. And we've developed through modification, GMOs, a seed that is the Roundup. It's called Roundup Ready. The Roundup won't hurt it. And so things like that, to where we really focused in on how can I get mass quantities, but when you look at fast growth, right, it's I can grow fast, I can get quantities, but what's the quality of it?
Right.
So when you start really looking at the quality, that's what we've lost is we're feeding more and more people. That was our focus, is how can we get more and more grain produced? How can we feed more people? But the problem is feeding more doesn't necessarily mean feeding them the way in which they need to be fed. And so that's kind of the focus of regenerative, is when you start looking at the brick scales of your vegetables and those kind of things. Bricks kind of gives you an idea of the nutrient value of it. And when you start brixing a lot of the stuff that's mass produced using chemical growth as opposed to the way Mother Nature intended it, with just bacterial and fungal rich soil, you start seeing that there's not much nutrient density to it. So you can have these great looking fruits and vegetables, and they can fill up your grocery stores, but the value, the true nutritional value on those is low. And so that's really what regenerative is trying to address. It's trying to address a couple things. It's feed the world better, reduce carbon, and also help farmers not go broke by trying to farm the way in which we do, which is chemically dependent, like you said, which costs thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars every year.
Which that strategy is to put food into people, and in order to do that, it has to look pretty.
Yep.
As opposed to have the nutrients, which maybe not look as pretty, but can be better actually for us than, like you were saying, the tomatoes that, they're like, wow, that's bigger than a softball.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? But you're not getting the nutrients. You're getting the nutrient maybe of a cherry tomato in that big old mass there.
And like you said, like none of this is new. I mean, a lot of this stuff that we're reading and the people that are out there really talking about regenerative, and there's lots of good groups out there trying to get this done, but a lot of your big farmers are waiting on one of the big ones to do it. But we've got to continue growing this from a grassroots, all the smaller people getting together, because the thing is my dad, before he was dying, he said, I don't want to leave the farm to y'all. The farm loses money. And if you look out, just look around San Antonio, family farms are being sold because they don't make money. No one can keep up with the Joneses trying to do the high input, chemical input commodities that we're trying to do. And so we have to start preserving that. And by doing it with regenerative, it's looking at different ways to put back into your land fewer inputs, fewer commercial inputs. So I need to use less diesel. I need to put less herbicides and pesticides on the land.
Cost.
So how can I farm it differently? And so like 60 acre grain field at my farm, I would drive my tractor across those 60 acres 6 times in the summer, just turning the dirt 6 times, first with the disc, then a chisel, then a sweep, then a field cultivator, and then plant it.
Right. So there's time element to that. There's diesel, which
Yep.
is expensive and getting more expensive day by day around here. And then there's, the carbon emission cost,
Yep.
which is you have a direct cost and we have an indirect cost. Talk a little bit, I want to shift something on you
Yep.
a little bit, just with regard to trying to set the stage for the problem here, which is subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know much about this. I know a little bit about the history, but I'll be interested for your perspective, which is we pay people to not produce in order to what's supposed to put a floor under the commodity prices such that we can actually have a profitable venture for certain farmers, right? So pay the ones so that way we don't have supply, because if supply is there, we go back to economics, price goes down, nobody makes money, and then therefore producers won't produce. Is that causing a problem, that old mindset of paying people not to farm?
I think so, and a lot of the commodities, a lot of the regenerative guys are saying basically the best thing you can do as a farmer is quit taking the government's money.
Why is that?
And a lot of it has to do with, if you look at the economics of farming. So the economics of farming right now are, for everything I produce as a farmer that ends up selling for $1 to the public, I get 18 cents of that. Okay? Because by the time it goes through everything, and so there's government subsidies coming in, well, it's causing me to have to do like we talked about the inputs, to find more land, to do more, to try to grow. And I don't know if you ever bought a tractor, but a tractor may cost more than your house. We won't talk about a combine. Combine will cost a lot more than your house. It's expensive to farm large amounts of land, and then when you're doing it, when you're trying to produce the commodities and the way in which these subsidies either tell you to or tell you not to, you get in just the old cycle of I'm chasing my tail, trying to chase that dollar.
Right.
And ultimately, I'm still only getting 18 cents on the dollar.
Right.
You know, and so like if you look at like, for instance, you're talking about the commodity. Our farm, the current farm bill that we're on is my farm is based on what they call base acres.
Okay.
And so my base acres are based on cotton.
Okay.
I don't grow cotton. Okay.
Makes complete sense.
But my base acres are based on cotton. Okay. Now our farm is 320 acres, and I think we have like 45 acres of that is pasture land. The rest of it used to be all farmland.
Okay.
Okay. And half of it's my uncle's and half of it's mine and my brother's. But we've planted some permanent grass called beedall in most of the fields, and so we're down to only 160 acres in the whole farm of farmed land. On my half, I only have 60 acres. Okay. But my base acres were set in the 1950s.
Wow.
So my insurance, my crop insurance from the government, everything is based on my cotton base acres as if I'm planting cotton from the 50s, which is 52 acres. So here's the thing. So if I'm like, okay, as a farmer, like I need to diversify. So I want to grow black-eyed peas.
Okay.
For commodity, ones that you can eat, not ones that deer eat. What the government tells me is if I do that, I give up my 52 base acres for life because now I'm growing a second commodity. And my commodity is cotton base acres.
Wow.
And I lose those for the life of the farm. So once those 52 acres are gone, they're gone. And so I can't get back into that subsidy program.
Wow.
And so I'm limited based on what I can do to try to keep my farm afloat. And so I was looking at all different kinds of things.
Now you would, a conspiracy type mindset would say, I get the rationale of it in the 50s, right? Coming out of industrialization, everybody's coming back. We need food production. We want to prop the price up so that way producers will produce. But now, based upon what you just told me, it seems very protective of those large farm operations such that they don't easily, it's a barrier to entry of new entrants for black-eyed peas or soybeans or whatever, versus to keep a price up. It lets big prior players all the way back to the 50s be protected while creating a massive barrier for others to try to innovate. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong. Of course, like I said, I'm just a simple guy from a little town that tried to get out and figure something out. But when they told me that when I tried to grow black-eyed peas, because my grandfather did, and I need crop rotation, I just was like, what do you mean I can't? Like it's a
But talk about the benefit of crop rotation, which has been done for
forever.
Thousands of years, right? You can't crop rotate because of the government subsidy. That is what I was hearing.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened with like with your large farms, we've grown to a monoculture, and so we may rotate. We're gonna do Roundup Ready corn, and then maybe we're gonna follow that with soybean, and so I'm not getting a true diversity in there because I need to get my corn crops in every year because that's what's selling, that's what's coming, or maybe it's milo. Whatever the crop is that year, but what we know about crop rotation is our dirt needs to go back to basically the way Mother Nature made it. It needs a chance to rest. It needs to have something else, because if you look at your dirt needs in an ideal, at least in all my research, if I'm going to get down to the ideal, I want my dirt to have an equal number of fungal and bacterial load. When you get to that point, all of a sudden, and how do you get there? I mean, they've tried recreating it in the lab. You've just got to keep playing with it to get it there. When you get there, things grow.
So chemically, we can't make that dirt be the way we want to.
No, we can't. And you can think about...
We can protect it,
yeah,
like from external forces, but we can't actually make it more nutrient rich.
Yeah, and think about like your fertilizers. The fertilizers are like, they're like sugar to a kid, right? I mean, it's an immediate high.
Right.
But it doesn't give the root system what they need. And so what happens is, if you look at our fields, is we develop hard pans, we develop this shallow layer of dirt that doesn't have anything in it. It's dirt. It's not soil.
Right.
And what we want to do is we want to make soil. And so we want to quit turning the dirt, because we know plowing destroys the dirt, it destroys the structure, and it won't hold water. So if we quit turning the dirt and we just every year we plant our seed back into it, and you can do cash crops this way. What we do is we slowly start building a root base, and we start getting bacteria growth back in there, because it's people that don't understand the biology of it is you need fungal and you need bacteria in the dirt because they deliver the nutrients from the dirt to the plant roots. So it's this huge symbiotic relationship. And without it, it requires chemicals to grow anything.
Right.
Which is why you can go into a barren desert, throw down some corn seed, pour a bunch of nitrogen and phosphorus on top of it, and grow these beautiful plants, right, real fast. That,
I didn't know about that one. Must be a YouTube video out
you know,
there somewhere that I can watch that.
I mean, you can grow it and pour water on it, right? But I mean, it just doesn't have the brick scale. It doesn't have the density that you need to truly be a healthy crop, because it's not, we live on an earth and we have to look back to the thousands of years, right, of how was it done? How was Mother Nature doing it? So one of my favorite examples, that one of the guys that I listen to and read a lot, Gabe Brown, he's like, you look back at the prairies, right, when we had buffalo, before we, ruined a lot of our land around here, is, high density grazing. They do a lot over in New Zealand and Australia, to where you bring in like 100,000 pounds of beef per acre, and they come in, and what do? I mean, they trample down the plants, they urinate on it, they drop manure, which we all, people buy manure for the yard, so we know it does some good. But then they're on that acre for a day, then they're gone. And that's how the buffalo were. And then our prairies, if you went back and looked at some of the samples they were taking, 50s, 60s, and 70s, you had these root systems that were multi-feet deep. Because what happens is, as an animal crops a good plant down from the top, you start getting root death from the bottom. And so if I don't let them eat that same thing every day and keep it short, then I'll keep a longer root, and then longer root, more bacteria, keep the bacteria in there, which comes from the urine, and the cattle will be in there and everything. That's how we start building healthy soil. And so people think, well, if I'm only farming it, I can't put cows in there on it. Well, how are you putting your bacteria and fungal back into the land then, if all you're ever doing is turning over and planting the seed, You can't ever get past needing inputs.
So before we get to this, the solution, which is, I've tried to explain it so many times and I mess it up. So if anything, I'm gonna be like, here, go listen to the podcast and you can hear the solution. One more piece that was shocking to me is we've talked a lot about the nutrients, the benefit for us as consumers of that food. Talk about the global effects, because that's something that some people, when you told me this, I was floored. But what about turning all this dirt? What does it do just for our earth, as far as the entire world?
Yeah. So and it's escaping me right now, and I apologize, but there's a movie that was done on Netflix, and they actually did a real good job. I enjoyed it the most. I've shared it with everybody I could on my Facebook. Because
we'll put it in the description. So whenever you think of it, we'll put it in there.
But basically, it culminated a lot of these people that we read, at the forefront of regenerative agriculture. And one of the things, Ray Archuleta was kind of the one that showed this in one of his talks, was if you look at some of the NASA satellite views of carbon emissions.
Okay.
I mean, it's in the news, it's everywhere, we have to stop global warming. Whether you believe it or not, the earth goes through cycles. Like, what's the cause of it? I'm not going to get into that politically, but do I believe our earth goes through warming and cooling phases? Absolutely. I think we could all say that. And we are in a warming phase. And so what can we do to reduce that, right? Well, one of the things Ray Archuleta showed in one of his talks was basically a NASA satellite view of carbon emissions, a time frame over a 12-month period.
Okay.
And so the interesting part, if you look at this huge red bloom over North America, occurs in April. Well, what are we doing in April throughout all the plains and everything is we're plowing.
Yep.
And so that kind of led to, if we're plowing, which means, we're breaking the ground, we're turning the dirt, because we have to turn it to, in our minds, as conventional farming is, we're trying to put organic matter back into the dirt, and we're trying to kill the weeds so that when we grow a crop, when I harvest your corn, you don't have wild oats in it and everything else, right? We want just corn. So that was the reason why we've conventionally farmed and plowed for all these years. So, but the problem is when we turn the dirt and the live roots and everything stores carbon. And so, like, you look at there was a graphic the other day that I found online that was, take a small farm that can run a herd of 30 mama cows. those 30 mama cows in the farming that you're doing in the year maybe produces, 120 pounds of carbon. But just the dirt and the grass from the pastures and the size of that farm that it takes to run a herd of 30 mamas and their calves stores 550 pounds of carbon.
Wow.
And so just by not turning the dirt, I know that I'm storing 320 pounds of carbon is what's positive from my farm, the 120 minus the 5.
Right.
I'm storing more carbon than I'm emitting by doing this operation. But what we see by looking at these carbon maps is when we turn the dirt, we're releasing it all in the atmosphere.
So we saved it up in the bank and then broke the piggy bank and
Correct.
put it all up in the air.
And then if you watch this out, we get to June and July, which in North America, right, is the hottest time of the year for us. And so our car emissions and everything are up. So you would think the map would still be red. The map's actually green. Because what's going on in June is everything that we planted is now absorbing. And so all of our crops are absorbing the carbon. And so it's kind of like the thing about regenerative farming for me, which, I'm only a 2-year convert. So the thing about it for me was it all just makes sense. And so anyway, we'll get into the solution in a minute. But that's the thing is, and so globally, if we just stop turning the dirt, just that thing alone, just stop turning the dirt, our carbon, we would quit emitting all this carbon, and then instead of having to spend, the rest of the year reabsorbing what we just turned out, we just will keep absorbing. And so there's some school of thoughts out there that says that, we may be in a 60-year, our world may be in a spot where we can't come back from in 60 years. But then there's a school of thought that says if we just quit plowing alone, we can reverse all signs of it in 20.
So it's not my truck, all you electric drivers out there, that's causing the issue. It's the fact that we're all eating our fruits and vegetables.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the solution, because I've been holding it back. I mean, the problem, we've got health issues. We've got, the financial issues as far as profitability. We've got the biggest, global issues with regard to global warming and the carbon emissions. All right, what's the solution to this? We talk about regenerative farming. Give me a nutshell of regenerative farming, and then let's get into some of the weeds. No pun intended.
So the nutshell on regenerative as a whole is we as producers, especially the smaller producers, the way in which you support yourself is, I don't want the 18 cents. I want the dollar. Okay. And so how do I get the dollar? I have to sell direct to consumer. Okay. So the nice thing is we are, and I'll just speak regionally, we are at a time where people are willing to say, I want to go direct to consumer. I want grass-fed beef. I want pastured poultry. I want eggs. And they're actually willing to pay a little bit more for that because they know they've been, humanely slaughtered and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a time in which you actually can do that. And so all of a sudden, if instead of getting 18 cents, I'm getting $1, it means that I really don't need as much land.
Mm-hmm.
So I can downsize a little bit where I don't need to spend all the money on the fuel and the inputs and the big equipment. I can farm a smaller amount of land and probably make more than I was on a larger amount of land. Okay. So that's the one aspect of it, is it won't take as much to make the same. Now, if I want to make more, then it's just about, the solution is turning your dirt into soil, first of all.
Okay.
So how do I turn my dirt into soil? Well, it's multi-crop rotation. It's utilizing livestock over that land. It's, a lot of people are like, well, I can't use the livestock. Well, then instead of doing your inputs with your nitrogen and phosphorus and everything else, let's go to basically putting bacteria and fungally dominant liquids back into the dirt. And so instead of spraying, straight up chemicals over it, and by the way, if you look at the chemicals were originally developed that we use for fertilizers in Germany. They were poisons to kill people.
Oh.
So that's where those came from, which is why when you see people applying our fertilizers, they're basically in hazmat suits when they walk around and apply them.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's.
Well, I mean, we've seen the litigation on Roundup and all. Yeah.
It's a deadly chemical.
Making me hungry. Sam,
yeah.
Thank you.
So we probably don't want to use those. So your solution is turning your dirt to soil by making it a bacterial and fungally rich environment that plants can grow healthy in. Mm-hmm. And so, there was research has been done forever. There was a guy who published a book back in the 70s, and he looked at basically the bone structure of rabbits he was raising. Some just in natural growth pastures and the other rabbits on, fertilized land. And the bone structure had divots in it, and it just looked unhealthy in the ones eating the commercially grown stuff versus just the natural pastures. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what, why do we possibly have a lot of health issues? It may be the way in which we're growing our food. So, sorry, that was the problem. So getting back to the solution. So it's stop plowing, first of all.
Okay.
And that is the key. If we stop turning our dirt, when we turn our dirt, it blows away. If you ever want to look at, drive across the plains, look at where we're doing a lot of commercial farming, look at their fence lines. Why is the fence line the highest point of the farm?
Right.
Okay. Because when they built that fence on that land was level.
Right. And now there's a little bit of a bowl.
And so we've just watched the topsoil blow away and wash away, and it's just slowly gone away because we have made our farms into dirt. And so so the solution is we have to make soil. And so that's the quick snippet of the solution.
So talk about, this is the fascinating part for me. So crop rotation, I get that one. Talk about using livestock to make soil, because I think that's again, this is where the innovation comes in a process to do it. Talk a little bit about what that looks like, about using livestock to regenerate the dirt to soil.
Yep. So farmers will cringe, especially ones that have been family farms, is when I say this is, when you stop plowing and you start putting livestock in your fields, what we always did to our fields, when it rains, you get your cows out, because cows walk across a wet field. They make, every track goes down and it makes it rough. And then when I drive my combine across it, shakes my teeth out, kind of a thing, right? And so farmers are like, I'm not going to put a cow in my wet field. So we have to get our livestock in there. And so if you really look at a great rotation, so I'm rotating a crop. So say this is my cornfield.
Okay.
So I'm going to follow my cornfield with a cover crop, multi-species, 7 to 13 different plants.
Okay.
15, 20, 40, however many seeds you want to throw out there, because part of it is every year is your field needs a little different. Every year it's going to change a little bit. So you're throwing a lot of seeds out there to try to figure out which ones grow over time. But also they're multi-beneficial. I want a pea to catch nitrogen. I want brassicas. I need some tall, some short, so that they're all multi-beneficial. Okay. And then I want to have the cows come in. And ideally, I want to rotational graze it. So I want to take my 30-acre field and run an electric fence across it in 1 acre increments. That means I can graze my field for 30 days.
Got it.
Okay. So I'm going to bring in all my herd on 1 acre for 1 day.
Just like the buffalo we were talking about.
And then the next day, I'm going to move them to the next acre.
Got it.
Okay. So 30 acres I can feed for 30 days. And then about 2 days after those cows have left, I want to bring in some sheep.
Okay.
And if you want to, you can actually put the sheep in there with the cows. That's fine too. But when you're high density grazing an acre, you probably want to have them separated.
Okay. So what are the cows doing for those? They're eating.
So they're eating and they're peeing and they're pooping.
And they're pushing the ground down.
Yep. And there's nothing, and the ground is not so much. It's more about the pee and the poop.
Got it.
There's nothing better. There's nothing better in the world than poop from ruminants, poop from cows.
I knew we were going to be
sheep.
talking about, cow crap.
The BS is about to get So the cows will eat, they normally would eat the most sweetest selective ones. But when you have a lot of cows concentrated in an acre for a day,
they're going to eat what they can eat.
They're going to eat what they can eat, and they're going to trample a lot. Okay. And so they're really going to put a lot of organic matter on the ground.
Okay.
Then they're going to just totally cover it in manure and urine, which puts our bacteria back into our soil that we've been taking out.
So how many head are we running on that acre?
So if your land could do it, there's people that do 80,000 to 100,000 pounds.
Pounds, okay.
Yeah, so
which is how many cows is that?
So make me do math in my head right now.
Just give me a redneck estimate for me, because I don't know this works.
Let's just say that a cow and a calf together. Let's do easy math. Let's say a cow and a calf, a pair, weighs 2,000 pounds. We'll just make it easy.
Okay.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a lot.
That is a lot.
It's a lot. And then, so we move them, and then we let it recover for a couple of days, and we bring our sheep in.
Okay.
Okay.
So I got poo, a pea, trampled matter.
Yep.
And then the sheep are coming in.
The sheep are coming in. They're going to drop some more.
Okay.
But they're also going to eat the weeds that the cows didn't like.
Got it.
They love eating weeds.
Okay.
I need my chickens in there.
Okay, now the chickens come in.
Chickens come in, because in that manure and everything that we've left, We now are going to have fly larvae and all these kind of things coming, that because normally when people see cows, there's a plume of flies over them.
Okay.
Well, that larva breeds and lives, and it all is inside that manure.
Got it.
So our chickens come in, and I have
So this is
mobile
every
chicken
single day.
tractors.
So am I moving a cow, bringing in a goat, and do I have basically the chickens 3 acres back? Okay.
Yep.
So it's just a little bit of a process chain here.
Yep.
All right, talk about the chicken coop, because
So the
I'm fascinated about the chicken coop.
Exactly. So the chicken coop. So the problem with chicken poop is it is supercharged fertilizer.
Okay.
So if you leave it in one place, it will burn the ground. I mean, it'll burn out the plants. It's just too rich. So you need to
okay.
spread it.
Got it.
And so my favorite chicken tractor, as we call them, right? So people build the chicken coops where they can drag them around. My favorite
An RV for chickens.
Exactly. So the coop moves every day across that acre.
Okay.
And so my favorite one is actually it's actually Gabe Brown's son. I saw in one of his books he did this. He took a little old stock trailer and he did it in that. And so the bottom of the floor is expanded metal. So when the chickens are in the coop at night, the poop's falling on the ground, and then I'm moving it the next day.
Got it.
But all day long they're out free ranging, eating the bugs that was left. You have meat chickens and you have laying hens. The laying boxes were on the back gate of the trailer that opens up. So when I want to gather eggs, I just open up the whole thing and gather my eggs out.
Oh, wow.
But it's a trailer. It's already on wheels. It's easy to move. I don't have to have a tractor that's going to drag, a big coop building on skids.
Got it.
That's going to, kind of track up the ground a little more.
Right. Okay. So we've got the cows, we got the sheep, we got the chickens.
Yep. How about pigs?
All right, pigs.
So pigs, the hard part with pigs is with the cow, they're just harder to move and stuff. And so a lot of your pig growing is going on in a pasture.
Okay.
And so pigs are great because they actually root up some of the dirt. They go in there, they eat some of the bad insects and everything. And so same thing, all the animals, they all start fixing the dirt. And the interesting part is when we stop plowing and we start developing soil, the deeper that soil gets, the bacteria and the fungal actually start holding water. Okay. And so when we start holding water, we don't need as much rain in a year to grow a crop. Okay.
That makes sense.
And so, how do you test it? Well, you can go out and you can do a water infiltration test on your field. So, right now I could go out to a field that's been no-tilled and had this kind of stuff going on. And there's basically, it's a piece of pipe with certain levels. You dump your water in and you time it. How fast does the water absorb into the ground?
Okay.
So the interesting part is a lot of these guys that quit plowing and started doing exactly what we're talking about, their field will absorb, 20, 30 inches within a few minutes of rain, of water. Whereas when it was being conventionally plowed, like when I tested mine just before we started this, it could absorb half an inch an hour.
Oh, wow.
So which means when all that water was hitting,
it was just going to evaporate because it
and
wasn't
in
going
Central
to the
Texas
ground.
where we have the aquifers,
right,
we dig holes in the ground to make stock tanks for our cows,
right,
because all this water runoff. Why is the water running off? The water's running off because it's not going into the ground. So the interesting part is the longer you do this, the less. So then you could take a farm that's been doing this for a long time, say get a 5-inch rain in an hour, huge rain.
Right.
Normally, that land is sloppy forever. You go drive your pickup across the field.
Wow.
Because the structure of the soil is holding the water in a way in which it absorbs it right down. It's not sloppy anymore because it's that dead dirt on the top that makes the slop.
Ah, got it.
And so how do you know when your soils get in there is when all that happens. You get a rain, you look out there, you don't see standing water. Standing water is a sign of unhealthy soil in that respect in a field.
Wow.
So when you start seeing the water absorb down, then I know that I'm getting my dirt structure right. And the more years you have this, and the more years you keep, the main key is to build soil is you have to keep a living root in your dirt all year round.
Okay.
So
as opposed to conventional, which you pull the roots out and basically kill them.
Yeah, because our thought was we've got to till that organic matter back into the ground. The organic matter's there from the roots, right? We eat the top, a little bit of the root dies, so we're putting organic matter in there.
Right.
I was talking to one of my old students the other day. He's like, well, how do I fix, I've got 25,000 acres in Mexico. that's been, it's basically looks like South Texas brushland. How do you fix that? And there's the reason why I liked that Netflix movie was they addressed pretty much everything that they've done. And one of my favorite ones in there was there's a lot of or some of the methods for getting dirt back that's been desertified.
Okay.
And so it's the desertification of our lands is what we've been doing by plowing them, right? They're not holding water.
Got it.
And so, there's certain ways you can go in this first time with some certain implements that it's kind of like plowing, to where you have a single narrow cutter and you're putting your biologics into the dirt.
Okay.
Okay. And so, another way a lot of people are doing it is when you look at how we irrigate from a big center pivot sprinkler going around.
Right.
Okay. But what are a lot of people doing at their houses now? They're doing drip irrigation.
Correct.
Because I don't lose as much.
Right.
Well, so farmers are starting to do that now.
Okay.
They're putting them down about 12 inches.
Okay.
Okay. So especially if I'm not plowing, if my water source is 12 inches down, and now I add some of my bacterial and fungal, so basically it's compost tea is what we call it. People make tea from worm castings. You create this real bacteria and fungal rich elixir, run it through your filters so it'll actually come out through the drip, and then they put it down there, so that encourages your root growth now to go
all
down.
the way down.
And that's how we start building soil.
So we've got all that. We're basically using the animals.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really just an electrical fence it keeps pigs in the right place?
Well, like I said, pigs are a little more difficult. That's why the pigs.
Not
end
that
up
I
in
have
the
much
pastures.
experience with pigs, other than hogs. Which hogs I didn't know you could quite
No,
control them when you get
pigs,
them out
yeah,
there.
the
But
electric fence and the pigs. No, pigs. They're probably going to be in their own little pasture. It's funny where a lot of people are really using pigs a lot are in orchards.
Really?
Because your orchard raised pigs, they're eating the bad fruit that falls on the ground.
Right.
Which
They're
gives
getting
you
all the
this
grubs.
really sweet meat, right? That you're getting. But then they're, the same benefits of the ruminant there. They're helping the dirt so the orchards grow better. And then what a lot of orchards are doing, because normally when you go into an orchard, you see, rows and rows of trees, but there's nothing planted in between. And so people are starting to do cover crops in between the trees.
Okay.
Because that naturally, you do your peas and, like I said, your brassicas. You start putting the nutrients back into the ground by those plants.
So your yield on your land is going up.
Now, I would be remiss to say that if you all of a sudden went to no-till tomorrow, would your corn crop be the same? No, they'll say you'll see a drop 2 to 3 years.
So that was what I was going to ask you. What's the timeline process? Because I would gather you were even saying things like you got to see what grows best in that land.
Correct.
So
you're probably looking.
What's the time frame to be able to see some benefit from this type of farming?
So the benefit is if I'm selling, like if I start with my multi-species rotation of plants and animals, like tomorrow, and my whole thing is, okay, so I'm going to start selling my herd, my cattle direct as grass-fed beef. Okay. So I'm going to keep that $1 instead of the 18 cents. But now I'm going to sell my chickens direct. I'm going to sell my eggs direct. I'm going to sell. So now I've replaced my income source that maybe I would have had from the grain.
Got it.
Okay. So that's kind of what you've got to trade one out.
Right.
Because to get your yields back, it may take 2 to 5 years.
Okay.
To get your bacterial and fungal rich soil started building back up to where I'm getting the same, load of corn per acre on the year in which I put the corn in that field.
So this is not a quick.
No.
It makes sense, right? You can't regenerate something with just injecting something into it.
Nope.
Because if that was the case, we would. What do you think is the barrier to scale? Some of the thoughts that come to mind as we talk through this is if I'm going to direct to consumer, every single now farmer has to connect with a consumer. Are there tools? Are there programs that are going around to help with the direct consumer to be able to bypass, democratize this type of situation? Or is it really just a hand-to-hand combat with, the farmers trying to, hey, I've got, 10,000 pounds of beef. Mm-hmm. Who wants some? What does it look like on the backside of this to get to the direct-to-consumer part?
So luckily, like I said, we're a few years into it now, to where there's a lot more there's a lot more people that are willing to help you out. And so even, it's funny, kids that are young don't listen to this, but Facebook is such a tool for,
I'm sorry, Meta?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They'll never even know Facebook now. They'll be like, what's Facebook?
Exactly.
You mean Meta?
But for us older people, Facebook, there's lots of groups and there's lots of marketing groups and there's lots of tools there to help, because the smaller farmers are trying to get together, and that's obviously it's a free market and advertising tool.
Which used to be the way they got together was through co-ops, right?
Correct.
That was the original reason for co-ops, but now that model still is gone. So and they'll lose money on.
And there's a lot, and there's a lot. There's areas where, because you would think, right? I mean, I'll compare this. If you look at sports, if you're Alabama and you're playing Florida, you really don't like each other. You're not going to help each other.
No, we do not.
Yeah, you don't like each other, do y'all? But like, it's funny thing, like if you look at, so let's take the rodeo world, right? The rodeo world, because we're in the National Finals Rodeo right now, the two bull riders that are 1 and 2 are pulling each other's bull rope and encouraging each other to go out there and win. They want to win, but they want to see their friend do well as well. Okay, so
Florida, you can win, just not against Alabama.
Exactly,
that's fine.
Exactly. So for the farming community, there's lots of areas to where, even though we're competing against each other for the same market to sell our beef,
right?
It's economies of scale, and so there's multiple small farms have gotten together and built a processing plant. Because that's the cost obviously you run into now, is processing everything that you're making.
Sure.
And so like the small operations like us, like we're just now moving into the grass-fed only beef. What we've done on our farm now is we're no longer giving any of our calves antibiotic shots or anything. So they're literally, and we'll have that first crop ready in a year. They will be antibiotic free. We never did hormones anyway, but antibiotic free and grass-fed only, never had a grain their entire lives. And so, what can you do with that? Well, right now it's just word of mouth. It's Facebook. It's getting on these groups. And then as we can do more and more, maybe if we get together 4 or 5 farmers, then maybe we can then go to some of the restaurants and some of the suppliers, because you're seeing more grass-fed only, antibiotic-free in grocery stores. H-E-B is doing it now. And so there's ways now to get that, because there are people who are willing to pay $9 a pound for ground beef as opposed to $3 a pound, because they want a healthier product.
Right, because they understand the nutrient value.
Correct.
Well, I tell you, this has been completely fascinating. And again, I know we talk about, it's just a great example of there are great ideas and innovation out there, even the things that we've been doing for hundreds of years. There's an ability to innovate. There's so much discussion about technology, right? What's the next, Facebook, Twitter, those type of things. The sexy tech is what people talk about, Tesla, right? But when we get down to core problems and, how do we have some big solutions to this, it really is innovating things that we've been doing for hundreds of years versus the latest gadget that's going to help.
Yeah, and the thing about the technology, right, it's like it's high risk, high reward. It's a lot of money real quick and a lot of that stuff.
Right.
But I personally want my kids to be around long enough to spend the money.
Sure.
And so that's the thing too. Like you asked the other fix, what a lot of people are doing is they're starting to put together investor groups to start buying farmland.
Right.
Because, the one way to get more and more people to do this is to take a group that wants to do it this way and understands the value in it and start buying more land so that they can do this, so that we can help solve these problems that we have.
Last question for you here. Look out, you said 60 years. That's too far. I might be dead by then. Who knows? By then we might be living to 200. Let's look out the next 15 years. What do you think, what do you foresee in the farming? Do you see this, the tipping point coming anytime soon, or is that to be determined? And this will be, what do you think we're going to see over the next decade? Let's just do a decade.
Yeah. I mean, in the next decade, I think if we look at, do I think that there's global change happening right now as far as global warming and those kind of things? I mean, look at where we live. I'm not that old. In the 1980s, I was still in Central Texas, 180 miles north of here, chopping ice all winter. I don't do that anymore. I mean, one thing we did was we caught rattlesnakes that would den up all winter long in a den. We don't have cold winters anymore.
Right.
So do I see there's a change? There's been a change.
Right.
So I think as we continue to spread the word and we get more people to do regenerative, and if people are willing to still pay, and it comes back to the consumer, if people are still willing to pay a little more for a product grown at a local farm that's close to you, and because the instant gratification is what leads us to do the things we shouldn't do.
Sure.
Then I think we will start seeing changes back in our climate and our society that are for the best. I honestly think we'll see healthier people, healthier kids, less cancer. I mean, cancer's a bad word, and what leads to cancer, I don't know, but there's a lot more people dying of it now than I knew when I was a kid. I mean,
sure.
My dad, my wife's dad, I mean, my wife's had cancer. I mean, you look at all the cancer just in our family alone, and it's like, why is it so much more prevalent now than it used to be?
Right.
I mean, I think the proof's in the pudding. And so I think the big change is, I think if we don't start changing this, I believe in what a lot of these guys are saying, that basically we've got 20 years to fix it, or we're on a path of no return.
Fascinating stuff. Sam, I really appreciate you coming by. This, again, these type of ideas, people don't talk about them enough. I know you're passionate about it and you're a smart man, so I'm always interested to hear. And now I finally know the right rotation with regard to, I always tell people there's cows and there's chickens, and I'm not, right. But now I've got it into posterity where I'm like, okay, let's just go to the podcast and look at it. But thanks for coming. I really appreciate you talking about it.
Thanks for the opportunity.
If you're listening to us here on Spotify or any of our audio podcasts, click subscribe on there. Let us know that we're providing you value. Same thing with our YouTube podcast. If you're watching us on there, thank you. Click on there, subscribe, leave us a comment. We'll have some description stuff to let you know what the Netflix video is and some of these other resources if you'd like to learn more about the regenerative, it will actually lead to regenerative health. But regenerative farming that's out there, because this is probably very early on. It takes a while to get going, but this is some fascinating stuff to look into the future. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.